Will tax defaulted real estate work in a recession? Yes, because you can buy those properties for 10 cents, 20 cents, 30 cents on the dollar. That's the starting bid. Well, welcome back. I'm Ted Thomas. When the Federal Reserve mandates that they're going to slow down the economy because of inflation, well, the Federal Reserve traditionally does that. And when they raise the interest rates, there's havoc in the real estate business. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And that's what generates a recession in real estate. As soon as they start those interest rates coming up, real estate starts going into a big funk. So we'll talk a little bit about it. Now, I'm involved in tax defaulted real estate. So traditional real estate is basically homes, small apartments, office buildings, small ones, sometimes small farms, even subdivisions and condominiums. Well, folks, that's the traditional real estate. And what happens to that real estate is sometimes people can't make their payments and they don't pay their property tax. So I'm in the business of tax defaulted real estate, which is nothing more than traditional real estate where they haven't paid the property tax. So when these people can't make their payments, well, then we hear about them. And guess what? The legislatures pass laws that mandate everyone pay the tax. They push the law down to the county commissioners and board of supervisors. And guess what? They're going to do something about that. So they go ahead and they lien those properties by sending notices of default. All right, so now when interest rates on conventional loans go higher and higher, more and more people are priced out of the market. And many of the loans that are created today, they have adjustment clauses where they go up with inflation. So when the Federal Reserve starts raising interest rates and the inflation starts generating higher and higher rates, we're going to have more and more foreclosure. Some of those properties actually will end up in tax defaulted situations. All right, now the slowdown causes salespeople to be out of work. They shut down title companies. Construction shuts down. Everything slows down as the interest rates go up. And if they keep going up, the market will get tighter and tighter. All right, so tradespeople, whether they're plumbers, carpenters, roofers, everyone involved in real estate suffers when the interest rates go up. So in today's episode, I'm going to discuss tax defaulted real estate and will that work in a recession? This is the one business that works well in a recession and it works even better in a good market. So I'm Ted Thomas. I've been involved in tax defaulted property for over 30 years. It's nothing more than a subset of the traditional real estate market. All right, now in the traditional market, people are failing to pay property tax. And when that happens, there's a consequence. What's the consequence? Well, the state has mandated that people pay tax. The county board of supervisors now has pain. And what is the pain? The pain is they don't have money coming in. The county has to have money to run the county. So the local county, what do? They tell the treasurer, let's put those properties in default for not payment of taxes. So they issue notices of default. Now, those notices of default will go out numerous times, and then the sheriff, along with the treasurer, they will basically not only lien the property, but they'll ultimately levy the property. When they levy the property, that means they're going to take it to a tax defaulted auction. So that's what we're talking about today. Will tax defaulted real estate work in a recession? Yes, because you can buy those properties for 10 cents, 20 cents, 30 cents on the dollar. That's the starting bid. 10, 20, 30 cents on the dollar. However, it always sells to the highest bidder. So it can start low, but it will accelerate depending upon what's happening in the market. All right, now the local county needs money to run the county. Now, what are they going to use that money for? Well, they're going to have to pay the county employees. I'll talk about that as we go along. All right, the owner that defaulted on the property, they're going to lose the property. And when they lose the property, they have now forfeited. When they don't pay the tax, they'll lose the property because they forfeit for not paying the tax. All right, when that auction takes place, the treasurer will wipe out and cancel the mortgage or the deed of trust loan. All right, so how do you mitigate all this if you're in a recession? Well, you want to be able to buy those properties at the lowest price possible, which is more than likely going to be beneficial to you because they're going to start out at low prices. In other words, 10, 20, 30 cents on the dollar. That'll be starting price with no mortgage. All right, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be municipal liens. It doesn't mean there couldn't be federal liens. But there's no mortgage or deed of trust on the property. All right, so newcomers, when they get involved, they're kind of surprised at all this because they're not used to seeing properties priced at so low. But newcomers, they're suffering the most in the market because if they bought a property and the interest rates are going up and their mortgage is going up, they might not be able to afford it, and they could become a victim of that inflationary market. All right, so it's a political problem, and the political problem is instigated by the Federal Reserve. So anytime interest rates are going up, that probably means that the foreclosures are going right along with it because they're going to raise the interest rate. In other words, the buyers of defaulted property are doing fine, but the people that already bought, they're not doing so well, or if they wanted to buy, they got high interest rates to put up with. All right, so let's talk about some solutions because that's what you want. All right, so solutions are this. Nationwide, there's over 3,000 counties that will auction tax defaulted property. Now, what does that mean? That means the counties are sending levy notices and taking those properties. The properties are being forfeited, and the counties are now selling those properties at tax defaulted auction. Now, the county, they have a tax assessed value on the property. However, the treasurer will sell that property 60%, 70%, 80% below the market, way below the market. They're selling it 10, 20, 30 cents on the dollar with no mortgage. How can they do that? The treasurer can set any price they want because they need to get rid of the property from the county's books. The county does not want tax defaulted property. So they sell the property back into the open market for 10 cents, 20 cents, 30 cents on the dollar with no mortgage or deed of trust. Now, these are open auctions. When I say open, it's a public auction. Anybody can go. Anybody that wants to, that's got money, can go to that. Now, do they have them online? Yes, they're online and they're offline. Sometimes the auctioneer will be auctioning in a room, and at the same time, they'll have a big screen, and then people can be online, buying online at the same time. So the auctioneer will say, okay, now we have a bid online, we have a bid in the room. And so they do both simultaneously at these auctions. All right, now the tax defaulted property business has been around for over 200 years. All right, now if you do it right at the tax defaulted auction, it's going to be clear sailing if you buy at the auction at the right price. However, if you make a mistake, I can tell you, you're going to be spinning your wheels, you're going to be struggling, and you're only going to make a fraction of the money that you deserve. So you want to be at the tax defaulted auction. You want to buy at the right price. You don't want to keep bidding the property up. You want to get it at the right price, if at all possible. Now, it's taken me over 2 decades of testing, adjusting, tweaking, and making a ton of mistakes to develop this system and get it perfected. All right, this system works. We're going to buy it low, and then we're not going to try and get retail for it. We're going to sell it low. Why do we do that? Because some of these properties are used and abused. The ones that are junk, you don't want to buy them. The ones that are really fixed up and nice and look like the country club, the bidding is probably going to go too high. So you want to buy it as cheap as possible at the auction, buy it low, get some margin between that and the selling price, but sell it some way so you can buy it low and sell it low. Now, conventional thinking is going to tell you, that you need a ton of money at the auctions. That isn't true, and I'm going to prove that with an example. All right, now, only the educated people do well at this business. So if you're not willing to get educated, you're going to have a problem because people buy these properties without looking around and without doing an assessment of the property. In other words, they don't have boots on the ground. Number one, you need boots on the ground so you can see the condition of the property. Number two, you need to know where you're going to sell that property. So that means you're going to go out and look at the neighborhood. So you want to have a buying strategy, buy it low, and if you do that right, you won't have a struggle. But if you don't do it right, you'll have a struggle and you won't make as much money as you deserve. All right, now the local county, if they're a small population county, what they want to do is they'll put those properties up for auction, as will the large population county. So I'm going to give you an example now. So one of my clients purchased a property in a county, a rural county, just north of Tampa, Florida. All right, now this property had good value, and he knew it had good value because he did what he was told, and that was he looked at the property, boots on the ground, checked the property out. Well, sure enough, he bought a property for $9,100 at the tax defaulted auction. It was used, it was abused, and it was all overgrown with trees. So all the other bidders passed the property up. So he went and checked the property out. Meanwhile, while he's checking the property out, he could check the property records. He found out the value was $91,000, more than $91,000. So he bought it for $9,100. It had a value of $91,000. Now that was a tax assessed value. All right, so he learned in our training what to do. What he did is he went out and checked the neighborhood prices, so he knew he could sell it for more than that. Turned out he found comparable values of over $100,000, even $150,000. So he bought it for $9,100, and it was at a value of $91,000 according to the treasurer, but comparable values are much higher. So he sold it to a fixer-upper person on a contract of sale to get payments for $150,000. Now, do I know you're going to make every deal that well? No, but the system works. So does this work in a recession? Yes, this works in a recession because he bought it right. He had good value because the county records showed that it had good value, and then he went out and did comparable values in the neighborhood. You can do the same kind of thing yourself. All right, so he stole the property for a $5,000 down payment and then continuous payments, and he sold it for $150,000 to a fixer-upper person. Now that profit is only a teeny tiny glimpse of the spectacular kind of profits that can happen in the tax default business. There's going to be many more in episodes that I'll do in the future. You see those little white circles? That's how many auctions are taking place within that state in the next 90 days. This calendar updates every single day. I'm here today to show you how to make money. To do that, I'm going to show you briefly that there are thousands of tax defaulted real estate properties across the 3,000 plus counties in the United States. This is quite interesting. You're looking at the Ted Thomas Magic Interactive Map and Auction Calendar. It changes every day. Now, I created the calendar and the map so I would know how many auctions are taking place every day in the United States. Now I can show the little guy how to make money. Most importantly, I created this system so I could have an auction list for each auction 24/7. Folks, in the small counties, small population counties, they'll have dozens of these properties to auction, just like I've just mentioned. How about in the large population? They're going to have hundreds, sometimes thousands. I've been in large population county where there's thousands of these properties. If you'd like to know more about that and the interactive map, right below me, we can show you where the properties are located and how many. Just go below me. I'm Ted Thomas.
I made 2 times my yearly salary in that 6-month period.
It's a secure program. I wish I had known this years ago.
Don't forget, request your free auction list right below me.